I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Welcome to Oppenheimer. Pretty decent, right? That's as good as it's gonna get. It's just, it's already late. I'm already losing steam.
Well, since you did that, let's start the conversation here, right? Well, okay.
First of all, so it was so shocking, from a filmmaker who's so known for eschewing, digital, effects and things like that nature, to use AI technology to replicate Robin Williams' voice over Cillian Murphy's performance. I thought was distasteful, one, but very effective. There was no doubt that I was listening to Robin Williams throughout that whole movie.
It's a deep fake, the whole movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, that's where I was going with it, was not Robin Williams. That's very funny. And he did use him in Insomnia. But maybe this was all just cut lines from Insomnia.
That's what I was thinking. Kind of similar to what they did with Harrison Ford for the new,
But of all the accents work in this movie, which there was a lot of it.
Yeah.
I think Cillian Murphy's was the best accent in the movie.
He was fantastic. We should do just a brief introduction. We're Auteur Detour. We're talking about the new work from our man Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, obviously.
That's
Ian is here and Chris is here, but
hey.
The main event, Travis White is here. No, I'm just kidding. But I do feel like that because I'm sitting center stage. We're actually recording in my garage.
And we just got out of the movie.
We've never done a recording like this. Usually it's like, obviously weeks of research leading up to the recording of the episode.
Lots of rough drafts.
And then weeks of prep time for each ep. I'm calling in from the library. Ian is at the Cinematheque in France. And so we're all in different locations. Today we're all together. We're just going to riff, see where it goes.
One big happy family.
What did you guys think of the movie overall?
Okay, can we answer that?
Are we doing this yet?
Yeah, I have. Would you think we should end with that?
No, I can definitely. I just don't know what my answer is yet because I loved it. Yeah. I think I loved it. Yeah. Right? I loved it. I think that it's not. Okay, so a little bit of backstory going into this. After our last recording, before the movie came out, I psyched myself up into thinking, and I even texted you guys, maybe Christopher Nolan's gonna reinvent biopic. Maybe he's gonna shatter our illusions of biopics the way that he did for superhero movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was really pumped on that idea,
Yeah.
And then I read the book that this movie's based on, and the way that book is written is very much cinematic. There's moments that I'm okay, that's gonna be the movie, and I'm okay, so this is gonna be a biopic. I kind of talk myself out of that, and it is a biopic. So I can only love it as much as I love any biopic. I'll say that, but I think it's a fucking feat of filmmaking. I think it's beautiful and really, really good.
I'll just throw, kind of just to respond to what you said. Is Raging Bull a biopic? Is Mishima in A Life in Four Chapters a biopic? Because this movie very heavily, I think, drew on those. And it was very radical. And it was his, touchstone in a lot of his projects, I think, is Stanley Kubrick in 2001 specifically. And this movie has so much of that.
Just like Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah, and Doctor Strangelove at the end, for sure. Just like he says, what does he say in that movie? It doesn't matter if you can read music, you have to be able to hear the music. And the movie is such an oral experience, a film experience. The sound is incredible. Now, we'll get into that, I guess. But yeah, so I would say it didn't have to. I think in the end, it kind of loses steam when it becomes a courtroom drama, and it feels so much like the end of my least favorite Martin Scorsese movie, which is The Aviator. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it gets into this kind of it feels so much more standard at that time.
It felt more like an Aaron Sorkin kind of or the last third of it.
Just the last third. Just the last end.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just saying it ran out of steam, and it had so much steam to begin with. You know what I mean? For me, I was this is an incredible thing, and I'll say I feel like you know, there were these little sections of Christopher Nolan's kind of career, and I was saying post Inception, he's sort of in another arc, and he's sort of doing this other thing. And I think
when he dips back into his old form,
and he fell with Tenet like so hard to me, and this feels like a totally new chapter, but builds so clearly on what he was doing in Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar specifically, and Tenet, not Tenet, I'm sorry, and Dunkirk so much. Right. That kind of like horror movie aesthetic, that kind of like assault on the senses. But I felt like he was drawing on so much of his like previous work, not just from like what you're saying, like from his like most recent sort of things that we've loved that he's done, but also lean in. We have one mic tonight, guys. So,
but also just like, I mean, I saw a lot of prestige in it, and I saw a lot of like Memento, you know, like in a lot of it. Anyway, Chris, what do you think of the movie?
No, it's a good point because I was thinking of all the different. Before I headed into it, like you, I'm not a big biopic fan. Knowing absolutely nothing about this one going into it, I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a revisionist piece where it's like this character that he's going to borrow from. But clearly he was making a historical kind of film, touching on real stuff. But it's very much a Nolan movie in so many ways. There's a scene where he goes down to meet certain scientists, and it's almost like he enters the Batcave. Like he goes down to this like subterranean thing, and like, oh, this is men in suits, you know. And there's so many themes. Like I think we all looked at each other when there's a scene where Oppenheimer is wearing a military uniform, and his friend says, "Take that thing off. You know, be yourself," or whatever.
No, I mean, can I say
yourself?
This phrase that he utters is the Nolan mission statement. It's be who you are, but better.
Right, right.
Yeah, he literally.
Yes.
Literally like if Nolan like put his pen down and was like, I'm done for the fucking week. You know, just like literally like summed up his whole thing in that one moment, and then it cuts to like a Batman suit up moment.
Yep.
Which is so
grabs
funny.
his pork pie hat and grabs his pipe. Like it's the batarang.
You know? Really, like it has the sound effects like Chris is doing right now. Like it's awesome. Funny and amazing in that moment.
You know, someone brought up like, I mean, when you watch a movie like, someone on Twitter made this like point already, but when you watch a movie like Mishima, you feel like the filmmaker and the subject of the film are so in sync that it's like incredible that this isn't a creation out of this guy's brain. And you feel that way watching Oppenheimer, I did, where I was like, this touches on so many themes, and he's able to put his own kind of like visual, you know, obsessions or whatever into the story too. But it's all there. Even when they go, it's not just a cave that they go into; it's actually under a football field.
Yes,
just like in Dark Knight Rises. And you're just like, what is going on? How is this possible?
God, I wish I had my notes because there was another moment like that was calling back to one of his movies in a weird way that I was just like, how is this like not something completely whole cloth? But then, you know,
we were talking, you know, earlier, Ian, I think on the ride here, but about Tenet and COVID and how Nolan was really upset because obviously Tenet was supposed to come out and then COVID hits, because he's a filmmaker who wants his movies to be seen in the biggest way possible, and this movie's absolutely no exception to that, right? Imagine watching this movie with the audio just from like your computer screen or something, you know. You have to be, you feel the entire like place shaking, like you were saying earlier, Travis. There's certain things like a horror movie element to it because it's just building and building and building. So this movie intersperses these incredibly loud booming moments with utter silence, and actually replaces some points where you think is going to be really loud with almost total silence. Like you know, there's a detonation scene where you think it's going to be overwhelming, and then it comes later.
They delay it so much, and I mean, in the beginning too, it's not even building. It's just like this. They're just intercutting these moments of like insane audio, like static, and just like kind of rumble at you out of nowhere with these visuals that again are really beautiful. They're not, you know what I mean? It's kind of swirls and like specks, like, and kind of like bouquet of like dust, you know, or whatever. But it's not. It doesn't feel like, you know, a Marvel movie credit sequence where they're throwing all these kind of generic kind of like, you know, modern day screensaver effects at you. Like it really feels like he's captured some just gorgeous imagery
about
how they created it,
how they were created.
Yeah,
if it was digital,
I bet it's not. I bet it's not. It feels too interesting and it looks too good. And throwing that in with the sound, and it really doesn't make any sense except like audio visually. And I think there's probably a lot of people who could watch this movie and criticize certain ideas of it, or criticize, like, I don't know, the story it's telling or the way it's telling it. But in terms of the ideas or the themes, but in terms of the visual experience, like, it's so powerful and so masterfully done. It's really beautiful.
Especially from the opening scene, the very first shot is water droplets from the rain that he's staring down at. And then it cuts to water and fire, but of course the ripple effect is really what's most emphasized, right? And that's the thing that he's kind of pondering. And he intercuts that dark blue with the bright red that comes next to it, and the swirling visual. It really gets you right into the movie immediately. And for, like I said, for a biopic type movie, that's not an experience I'm accustomed to.
No.
That end, Nolan does such an amazing job of his narrative, right? This is so much stuff told in one movie across so many different time periods, but it's never confusing. The use of color and black and white.
I was going to ask you guys if you were confused by it, because I did just read the fucking 900-page, or I listened to a 26-hour audiobook of it, so I kind of like was able to follow the beats.
Yeah.
But the book is told chronologically, which this is definitely not.
Interesting.
And so I was like, I wonder if they're following what's happening right here, because it's not like...
He frames the settings really well.
Yeah.
He makes it clear where they are at all times.
I mentioned Mishima earlier. Like, when he started, I think it says fission, and it's in color, and he sets up kind of one kind of narrative thread, and then he says fusion, and it's in black and white. I could be getting that mixed up, but it's a different thread. Again, Mishima does a very similar thing where it shows like these different parts of the author Yukio Mishima's life, and there's a part that's sort of naturalistic, there's a part that's filmed in black and white, and it's very like classic Japanese cinema, and then there's this kind of like incredible like hyper real scenes from Mishima's plays acted out against like some of the most spectacular Technicolor sets with costumes, with music by what's his name, Philip Glass and stuff like that. Right. So anyway, I really feel like that was a major inspiration for how he told this story.
It's also not. I mean,
but it wasn't confusing.
It is the same as the Dunkirk introduction, right? Of like introducing with one little chiron of like a word, you know, and then being like, this is this storyline.
Yeah.
Also, borrowing from Dunkirk as well, the fact that we never see the other, right? Like, for example, they could have shown the explosion of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's only over the radio. We only experience the entire movie through the perspective of the main characters, never outside of that for a moment, just like Dunkirk. Right?
Yeah.
We could have chosen a couple different ways to go about that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let me tell you then one thing about, because you did mention people could criticize the story that it's telling or whatever. And you mentioned a minute ago, like the final third being a little bit, well, it slows down and it's, we're going to get cozy.
But right now we look like when, like Bruce Springsteen goes to the mic of like the other backup singer and they get like uncomfortably close as they're singing into the same mic. That's what we look like right now, three of those, like the Pep Boys.
Well, the final third of the movie is this sort of courtroom drama. And I really was most emotionally impacted in this movie in the moment when he first starts, the beginning of that segment, basically, when he first starts to feel the weight of what he did. You know, there's like him giving a speech in front of people, and he starts to like, the wall is wobbling behind him, and then he like sees torched people on the ground and stuff like that. And I'm like, I was really so ready for this. Like, I knew that the movie wasn't winding down. I knew that we were going to get another fucking hour of movie, you know? And I'm like, oh, thank God he's going there, where it's like, now we're going to see Christopher Nolan, like, maybe this is going to be another one of his movies where he analyzes this man that he's built in all, like, across his filmography, right? The way that Dark Knight Rises does.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is going to be that. And then it turns into not that. And it turns into a movie about how does society want to tear down a great man. And I was disappointed by that, because it didn't have to be that story. And that's my main frustration with the movie, if I have one, is just that, like, it's more of Christopher Nolan being like, this was a great man, and we don't know how to handle a great man like that. Well, instead of like,
we don't know how to. Well, I would push back maybe a little bit on, like, do the politicians represent like society in general? Like, do they represent the people?
Well,
or is there like a system in place that you think you're a great man in control of stuff, and when you're really just making yourself part of like
maybe it is
cog in the machine.
And there's a line where Albert Einstein, the actor Albert Einstein, says, "No,
Albert Brooks, real name Albert Einstein."
No, that's true. No, where he says, something along the lines of, "They will tear you down. Like this, there's no up from here. It's only down from where you are right now, basically." And it feels like that's the statement that he's making. Whether or not it's like a system that's in place and he's making a statement about the system or not, I was more interested in him making a statement about like what Oppenheimer had to reckon with in that moment, because in the book there's a lot of that, and it didn't have to go that way. I mean, I like that he chose a path and wasn't muddied by like his personal demons that much,
Mm-hmm.
But that would have been like a more politically appealing movie to me. Just like if he would have like a little bit reckoned with himself a little bit more or if the movie reckoned with him a little bit more and not just like built him up as this man that was, almost perfect.
You think that's what the movie's saying? Because I don't know that I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is also kind of in keeping, too, with Nolan's character, right? Like, kind of avoid the political implications a lot of the time, or at least subtly hint at it. He doesn't tend to go too deep into that.
Well, when I said it reminded me of The Prestige, one of the things that it reminded me of is, like, the ending of The Prestige when Hugh Jackman's character is, like, not repenting about everything that he's given up his life for, and he's just like, no, this was all, But and it's like... That's very much what like the Oppenheimers thing.
Yeah, but don't you think that's a big like Christopher Nolan theme? And like he doesn't maybe spell out like this is not a good guy, but it's not about whether he's good or bad. It's about the myth that you tell yourself. Yeah. And everyone was reinforcing this myth about him, like, you gotta do this, it's for the good of everybody. And there's a certain point where a lot of people on the sidelines are like, wait, like, I don't know that we're doing the right thing. Like, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
there's flaws in the story you're telling yourself. And then he's just like, and he is like the last one to realize the story that he's telling himself might not be true.
But it's not even about whether or not I want Oppenheimer to get there. It's that I don't know if I like where Christopher Nolan lands on him. Like, I don't know that Christopher Nolan is judging him the way that he's probably judging himself, like, in the movie.
But how do you think he's judging him? Because I think he's just like he becomes just like, he tells himself a story that is then like usurped by the powers that be when they no longer want him. And it's like, oh, your story's actually this. Like, you've told yourself this, but we can take that same narrative and twist it, turn it into something else, like invalidate you, like, you know what I mean, and just kind of use you for whatever we need you for, and then discard you. And then he's kind of realizing like, oh, I did everything wrong at the end. And I think Nolan's very critical of him, and I think what's his name, Harry Truman, is almost like a more honest character in the story of the movie. He's like, you don't matter, I pushed the button. But again, but then you have to ask, well, can I just do an aside really fast to make a point? I remember when, like, post-Iraq War, there was, like, a lot of people there was, like, this kind of, like, meme or something where it was just like, God damn it, if only Bush hadn't been elected. Like, everything has started with that election. They stole the Supreme Court, stole the election. All this stuff happened after that. Jesus Christ, what a turning point. And this one guy, and I'm not saying it's one person, but, like, this paper came out, and he was just like, okay, look at this, and this. Even if Gore had been elected, even if he had gotten that report on his desk, bin Laden determined to strike inside the United States, there's still a huge chance that 9/11 happened. Yeah. If that happened, how could we not go to war with Afghanistan? Like, even if Gore is president, what's the difference in the rest of the government? Then, if that happens, and basically he made a very, very convincing case that Gore would have done all the same moves Bush had, not because they are the same person or that they represent the same like ideology of in a lot of ways, but that the like apparatus of American foreign power at that moment was already pointed in that direction, and all it needed was, I'm not calling 9/11 a small event, but all it needed was that event to tip it in such a strong direction.
Historically speaking, it's always cyclical, and it's always like you can see how it's going to go. Even doesn't matter who's in office.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't matter who's like in charge of the thing and blah blah blah. But it's like. So I guess it's just like that. I think that tension between like this is the great man of history, and then it's just like no, that's what you tell yourself. Right. And that's what keeps everything going.
I really do actually agree with you, and I appreciate that. I think the thing that rubs me the wrong way, and again, I don't even know why I'm talking about it like this. I fucking loved it. And it's like
no, it's good to criticize,
but I do think that like. The reason maybe why, and I don't want to be one of these guys like, in the book, but in the book, Strauss.
He's talking about Hop on Pop, everybody. He's holding the book in his hand.
Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Strauss, he's like the second build character in the movie. He's introduced, like I said, it's chronological in the book, and when he's introduced, it's as his adversary. Like, there's no part of you that doesn't know that the turn is coming.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And in the movie, you can sense the tension. You can feel it. It's not a fucking blindside when it's revealed. But it is very much a Shyamalan twist when it becomes like, oh, Strauss was the guy the whole time. Like, that was behind every bad thing that's happened to you in the last hour of this movie, And it's like... That was when that happens in the movie, and it does this like hyper cut of all of the times that Robert Downey Jr. was fucking pushing his chess pieces into getting Oppenheimer where he wants him. I'm just like, oh, so now this is what he wants you to walk away with. But like there was this other guy that was like, we can't let Oppenheimer be the man. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not. That's the story that he went with, and it's not an untrue story. Like, he was his adversary, but I don't know why that had to be like the big reveal of the movie that Robert Downey Jr.
I felt the same way. I'm like, what is the significance of this? I mean, again, it's to me, it's like, these like competing kind of narratives of what is like the how are we going to go forward. And I'll say one more thing. A lot. Again, if they thought he was like a real communist, they probably wouldn't have put him in charge of the thing. But they did use them because, I don't know if it's really explored enough in the movie, but, I actually just watched a little documentary on it, the same kind of subject matter, and it was because a lot of them were Jewish, and because they had this anti-fascist fervor kind of in these communities, that was based on their political activism, their left-wing political activism, which at the time, again, openly communist in America. That is what made them want to fight. That's a big part of why they were able to be kind of like brought into the American military apparatus, and that's why they were doing it. Yeah. And I think being used by the government and then kind of being discarded.
It does point to, like, there is one moment when he stands up to Matt Damon and it's just like, I know more than you think I know. I know that you're not, like, you didn't hire me despite me being a communist. You hired me because I'm a communist. And he does say that in the movie. But you're right. Like, that is such an important part of it. And like,
yeah, and I just want to say, like, the idea that these systems like are sort of beyond the control of any one person. I'll just also say, like, the point that like you can't be in those rooms and say, I think it's immoral for to make a hydrogen bomb. You know what I mean? Like, he's like kind of beating around the bush about it again and again and again. Because if he says that, he's out. Like, you know what I mean? And that's like the government we live under. Like, that's why things go certain ways. Because like, if you really don't believe in it, like, if your brain isn't completely warped by the concept of war as like a moral good or like just a necessary evil, whatever you call it, it's the same thing, then you're not gonna have a role in those rooms. Like when they're talking about which Japanese city bomb, I mean, that's a crazy scene. Like, you know what I mean? It seems insane. It seems insane. And of course they're like, we know for a fact that the Japanese people won't surrender until we do this. And then like later on, they're like, oh yeah, we heard that was like a lie, and of course it was. You know, we can't show you the intelligence, right? I mean, it takes you right back to Afghanistan and Iraq specifically. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's like the politics of the movie, I guess. I mean, do you have any...
Again, I think it's more complicated. I just think it's more complicated than it would seem. You know what I mean? I think he doesn't always spell out like this is good and this is bad. I think it's more for him about how are you like kind of like lying to yourself about what you see. And when you have this kind of vision and you want to see it realized, you know, what are the lies you tell yourself to get to that point? To
the noble
lie. Yeah,
right? We see this in so many of his
lying
movies
to other people, lying to yourself.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
the noble lie, the ignoble lie.
Right. I mean, you know, Batman movies. You know, Memento, obviously one of the first earliest iterations of that.
I did think of that movie. Yeah.
Well, the first time I thought of Memento was just when I saw that they were telling the story through narrative action. And then black and white cut-ins with exposition. You know, like a lot of the like early black and white, especially cut-ins, were like. I mean, the whole movie's incredibly expositional, or whatever you call it. But and I didn't even mind it. Like in ways that I sometimes mind it in his movies. I thought it was all information dumps the whole time, but it was like propulsive and like
it was extremely propulsive. One of his best, like in terms of how it like gives you information.
100% for a 3-hour movie.
Yeah,
I mean it's pretty amazing to maintain that kind of pace and like fascination. I had to go to the bathroom. I'm not.
I think the only time that I got a little bit worried was when it felt like they were leading up to the ignition of the bomb, and at the same time, it's also hitting like a sort of fever pitch about his communist activity at the same time, like in the other storyline. And I was sitting there and I was going like you said a minute ago, like there is like a battle of which storyline it's following a little bit, and it was kind of like I don't know really what all of this is going towards. Like I didn't know like where the finish line was going to be, you know, because I figured he wasn't going to do like a full biopic of like his deathbed or something like that. Like I figured that there was going to be like a finale, which I think he nailed. But like there was a moment, you know, 2 hours in where it's just like, this is just all exposition and then it's just going to be done. Where are we going with this? Right. You know? Right. Like, but I think that is partially why he threw in that reveal, because there had to be like some kind of finale at the end of that, you know.
I think he could have pushed it less hard though.
Yeah.
You know, I think it could have been done like with a lighter hand. And that's my major criticism about the movie, honestly. That's it. I think everything else was pretty good.
You felt the trial and the last third of the movie was a bit heavy-handed?
Yeah. It was it was just too conventional, and it didn't have, like Ian was kind of saying, like it didn't have the payoff that I think he wanted it to. I think the themes were there. I think that they work in the movie. It just felt a little like getting there was like just too much work and stuff.
Have you ever seen a biopic that had a great quote payoff? You know, it's a really hard. I would imagine it's a difficult thing.
Again, I think if you consider
if
like
if
we don't call Raging Bull a biopic, you know, I've heard it called a biopic. I've heard it called a boxing movie, like a sports movie.
Yeah.
It's like that's like an unclassifiable film. That's like maybe my favorite movie ever. So it's like I don't think it falls into any of those like kind of pitfalls. And I also think Mishima Life in 4 Chapters was one of the most incredible movies ever made.
I love some biopics that you don't always think of as biopics, you know?
Yeah. Young Einstein.
On the spot.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the spot, it's going to be hard for me to think of them, but there's plenty of movies where
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
that is a biopic. You know, like because it's not trying to tell a life story. It's telling a moment in time.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
And, like,
this real event that happened.
Like 8 Mile.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, when it's not trying to take on the entirety of somebody's life and it's just being like more about just like an event, then those are also biopics generally, you know?
Yeah.
And those can be great. And this is kind of that too. Like it, again, in the book, there's a third of the book, not a third, maybe the first fucking 6 hours of the 26-hour audiobook is his childhood.
Damn.
And they cut all of that off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
rightfully so.
I'm glad they did, because
I would have loved to see Cillian in some short shorts.
Yeah, a little English.
Mother, may I have a lolly, please?
His voice. He's so good, though. But
he was fantastic. Every time we got to him,
great.
I'm like, thanks for stopping filming the actors and show the actual guy who is Oppenheimer.
Yeah. They actually did a pretty good job too of aging. You know, a lot of the time you have the same actor and they portray a decade span. It looks bad when they're older.
Yeah.
It's like
not only does it work like in terms of like it just looks right, but there's a moment when he's young. Fucking Oppenheimer, and I'm like, oh, he should do like young Charlie Chaplin because he looks exactly like Charlie Chaplin. And then there's a moment when he's older, and he's like, I'm like, oh, he needs to play David Byrne in the movie.
I thought that too. Yes, I totally saw David Byrne. Yeah,
and I'm like he transformed himself. Like he really
put this man to work. Put him in the mines. Give me like 2 biopics every year of my chosen celebs. Yeah,
I'll take a David Byrne biopic with Cillian Murphy. Fuck yeah. But anyway, I was saying that, like, it leaves out this whole childhood part of he was this incredibly coddled kid whose, like, parents gave him everything he wanted, And I think that's, like, would have worked with the Nolan themes in a lot of ways, I kind of wish that there was something of that in there. I'm glad that it did.
There's that one line where he just says, like, he's like, I'm a self-made man. He's like, I can relate to that. Oh, really? He's like, yeah, my dad was a self-made man. I thought that said it all, kind of. That kind of said it all. It's like, I'm a son of a rich kid. I mean, I'm son of a rich guy. Like, I don't know.
And then there's the Institute, which they kind of, like, talk about a little bit, but they don't really spend any time with his life at the Institute, which is, like, post-Manhattan Project. He starts this Institute for, like, just a place where scientists and artists can go and poets can go and just, like, be free to do their science and art and math and whatever, and, like, that was a huge part of the book, and, like, he left that all gone. So it is, in a way, really just focused on, like, the one event, or, like, the 2 events. The event of the fucking Trinity, and then the event of, like, him getting fucking
his security clearance,
right. Which is a good way to do a biopic, in my opinion. Like, you have to just focus on 2 things. You can't fucking. It was kind of weird, actually, when they cut to him, like, as an old man.
Well, I thought that worked really well, too. And he reminded me a little bit of, what's his name? Keir Dullea. Well, I mean, I guess maybe reverberations of 2001 through Interstellar.
Yes.
Like the old guy in that movie, he looked a little bit just kind of like, where am I? Like, you know what I mean? He's got the award on, and he's like, who are these strange people?
I want to know how much of Christopher Nolan being fascinated with Oppenheimer, because he has said way before this movie came out that he's the most important man in history. Like, he's like, that's the guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he puts that line in this movie, and, like, he's always said that, at least as far back as an interview that I saw, Yeah. And I want to know how much of him is fascinated with that because he's fascinated with Stanley Kubrick, who was fascinated with the atomic bomb, like, more than anything, Like, that was Kubrick's whole fucking thing, was, like, how man can create these things that can destroy the whole world. And, like, Nolan's whole thing is not that, but he is very fascinated with that. Like,
I always wonder how far back these directors' interests and obsessions go, because when The Prestige came out, right? So also did The Illusionist. And people are like, what? Oh, you're ripping off this idea. But in reality, that came way earlier. He would have put that movie out sooner had the studios not come up to him and said, hey, we have a Batman movie for you, right? Mm-hmm. And then it came after that one. And so I wonder, just as a curiosity, how long has he been obsessed with this Oppenheimer idea, and how long has he been working on maybe trying to put this together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, we've talked about, like, directors that sort of need to find something to do, like, when they're on a point, and then they, like, pick a character in history that they relate to and make a movie about it, And it could be that, but I also think, like, it does seem like he's liked the idea of Oppenheimer. I mean, he stands for Christopher Nolan.
He does, but I was surprised again at how critical he was of the character, kind of in the movie, or like how much the character is kind of like dithering and really kind of put in his place like several times in a way where you don't necessarily feel sorry for him. You're just like, do something. Like the wife is like really horrible and annoying, but then you're like, but she is right though. Like do something. Yeah. Like
I didn't like the scene. I'm gonna be the asshole. There's one scene with a woman in it. Actually, there's 2 scenes with a woman in it. Ooh. And
there's a couple scenes with women in them that I'm thinking of. That I'd like
can I say this?
Wait, I don't know. What are you gonna say?
Leave it to Christopher Nolan to make the least sexy sex scene possible, where you literally have the hottest actress in Hollywood right now, Florence Pugh, titty-ass naked, and showing like almost penetrative sex, and they're talking about like Sanskrit and fucking what it means to be a communist. It's like, it's insane.
But that's kind of the point.
Wow, I felt really seen in that scene. I felt like
no, I just mean like,
this is hot.
I'm not judging.
How did he find my diary?
I'm not judging those scenes. I'm saying like, of course there was all this like internet fervor of like, holy shit, he's doing it. He's gonna make a 15-minute long sex scene with Florence Pugh, and everybody's just like, oh my god. And it's like, no, he's making Christopher Nolan movie. Like, there's titties, but there's no sex scene.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a sex scene. There's sex. It was. I wouldn't call it like sexy, but it was erotic. I don't know. It was a legit sex scene. I'll say that much for it.
I think that it was more like intimate in the scene with what's her face, Emily Blunt.
Emily Blunt, when?
Yeah, when they are first touching hands, or whatever, you know,
being romantic.
Yeah,
you know, Florence Pugh, I think, is like famous for like getting naked at the drop of a hat in real life, and I think like that's who he had to work with, someone who's like, for whom nudity is not necessarily sexual. So I think he and her were probably like on a similar wavelength there. He's like, all right, I can work with this. Right. It's not the hottest sex scene in the world, but it is a sex scene, and I thought it was cool that he branched out. And he did, to like take a break to read a book in a like 10, 15-second sex scene. That is on brand. And bring me this philosophy, you know? Like, that's very
well, then there's the one in the actual, the kangaroo court.
That was cool too,
yeah. And that's really unusual for Nolan to do, in the fact that a lot of times visually with Christopher Nolan, what you see is what you get. He doesn't put like an Aronofsky and kind of like, is this really happening? Like where you're warping your sense of reality. So that was kind of unusual for him to do in a couple of different ways, right?
He was stretching. He was stretching in this movie, and it felt great. I thought he did a great job. And
I'm here for it.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, because I forgot, the reason why I started talking about it is because the scene that I didn't like was not that scene. It was the scene where Emily Blunt gets her fucking Oscar speech, you know? And
in the courtroom? Yeah.
And it just felt Hollywood to me. I was just like, this is not like the movie.
Well, we had not really seen her like that ever. Like, and it was just like, who? Now she's like this. It reminded me of the scene.
I got this weird sixth sense where I can see the lines that the actor got to audition with. You know, every time that there's like a movie and then there's like a moment like that where I'm like, oh, that's their audition lines, and that's so clearly her audition speech.
It's definitely the Oscar clip scene.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when Tim Robbins becomes another person, like when he's being interrogated by the cops in Mystic River. Do you remember that? He's like this weird, muttering, bumbling guy, and then he's like all of a sudden like, well, wait a minute. And he's like, all of a sudden he's like a lawyer, and he gets out of it or whatever. And you're like, wait, that's what it reminded me of. And it's a cool, I liked that scene in a way, and I liked the Tim Robbins scene in a way, but there is like, you didn't quite pull that off.
It's just that the whole movie feels like, this is going to sound wrong, and it is wrong. But I was going to say natural, you know what I mean?
No, it has like a flow to it.
Grounded in its own reality, I'll say.
Yeah, there you go.
And that movie, that scene feels like a movie. It just feels like all of a sudden she's just like, no.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because in my mind I'm watching the scene and I'm noticing. Have you guys ever seen the end of the first Star Wars episode 4, A New Hope, but they take the music out of it, where the coronation scene, and how awkward it is?
Yeah.
I was in my mind when I'm watching that scene with Emily Blunt, like, what would this be like with no music? And it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
You know?
I did like the music in this movie a lot. Did you guys like?
Music was fantastic. The editing was fantastic. So this was the same editor from Tenet, right?
I don't know.
So I think I heard that, and we were not fans of the Tenet editing.
Two of us were.
You guys, wait, what? Oh, sorry.
I love Tenet.
I'm doing like what's his name? Memento-esque rewriting in my mind.
Exactly.
We all hated Tenet.
Famous hated Tenet.
Anyway, there were some. We brought up some issues with the editing. The editing from the beginning was like one of the best parts of the movie. I mean, it was like flawless. It was like so good.
And it really had to be because, like we already talked about, but those moments. I mean, we haven't even talked about this movie, and we're like 40 minutes into this.
What do we want to talk about?
But I was gonna
we talked about Florence Pugh naked. That was all I wrote in my notes. I drew a sketch a la Titanic.
Those moments when it's cutting to vision or whatever it's cutting to.
Yes.
Yes. That's like incredible editing in those moments because it all feels like we've said propulsive. It's just like so
musical.
And it's I loved it. I mean, I loved it.
I'll say one. Oh, go you go ahead.
No, I'm talking about editing, and he really uses that shallow focus so well because he puts you right into his headspace. That combined with the sound, combined with the visual, it's oppressive. It's kind of horror-esque, but it's really effective, especially for a quote biopic movie, right, where you don't usually see that level of intimacy.
They lost focus a lot in this movie, and I wondered if that's a technical limitation of the giant cameras that they were using. Like if it's harder to like they've got a guy with a crank, like doing the focus. It's not computer programmed like on modern,
Well, I think I told you guys in person a week ago or whatever, but I listened to a E.N.H.E.I.M.E.R podcast, like an episode of a podcast that he was on.
I listened to the Kill Ian podcast.
That's every episode of Auteur Detour, hosted by Travis White. But he talks about how intense of a shoot this must have been or whatever, and he said it seems like that, and certainly like the scale of his movies are huge, but it was a 45-day shoot really, and it most scenes are him, Christopher Nolan, and a fucking sound person walking around, and he's like, he feels like an independent movie in that way, even though he's holding this giant, the nature of having these giant cameras means that there can only be one. So you're not doing all of these, and Nolan hates unnatural sound, basically. So he only uses boom mics and stuff like that. So he's like, let's talk about the audio mix of this movie too, because me and Chris were talking about it for a minute, but there's a lot of lines that get lost in the mix, and I do think that it didn't bother me in this movie at all, because first of all, there's too many lines, and you don't need to hear them all to follow the movie. It would be too much to try to fucking study it like a script. But also, I've just really gotten on board with Christopher Nolan's musicality of it's about the fucking what you're seeing with the language of the movie and not about the dialogue, not about what they're saying.
Thank God for that too, because that was my biggest fear going into this. Typically when I watch a movie, so this was the second movie actually since COVID that I've actually seen in the theater. So as a person,
and now we have COVID probably.
Yeah, I know, right? I have become accustomed, especially as someone who's hard of hearing, to watching movies with the subtitles on, especially Christopher Nolan movies, because the audio is almost indecipherable for me. It's drowned out by the sound of the sirens or the cars moving or what have you. So my biggest fear going into this was, this, I'm not going to catch so much of this movie because his exposition is everything. And you're right, Ian. You can it's almost like a dance where you can follow the film for the most part without missing too much. Travis, we looked at each other one time because it was probably a throwaway line. It didn't really matter. But Oppenheimer's leaving his house and Emily Blunt says, blah, 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 blah.
Yells something at him, yeah.
Look out here. And we're both like, what?
It seemed important at the time. It seemed like and I was like, I wish I heard that one. Oh well.
Yeah, and it was
and there was no atom bomb going off to drown out the sound. There's no real reason we couldn't hear it. But
no, but you do feel more like you're in the room with the people than, I'll say this.
Absolutely.
I watched The Little Mermaid, the new live-action Disney Little Mermaid. made by...
The woke mermaid, yeah.
How dare you? But...
Oppenheimer is not woke. I'm just really excited to tell
I'm not going to give a review of Little Mermaid right now, but I will say that the worst part of Little Mermaid is that I would bet that 100% of the lines were 80-yard, were like recorded on a fucking soundtrack.
And I hate that, but there is some, you have to like forgive a little bit of if you're recording underwater.
Well, sure.
Like how do you, I don't even...
And so much of it is musical, so it has to flow in with the music. And
and like a crab's mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Centimeters.
You're not, I mean...
Millimeters.
You're right. You're not going to make it look naturally like the sound is coming out of a crab's mouth anyway, but... There is such a difference when people are walking down the fucking hallway talking and the sound isn't coming from your ears. It's coming from them.
Yes.
Like, it's a huge difference. Like,
yes.
Right.
And it really felt it. And that's why I don't give a shit if I don't hear everything that they say. Because you're watching...
Yeah.
It's like a silent movie in a lot of ways with more dialogue than any talking. Yeah. Because it's like... Because... Silent movies will put up one fucking screen card that says the important thing you need to know about the scene, and then you see them talking for fucking 3
Right.
One of the funniest things in silent movies is like they made Shakespeare movies. Like they were so excited to bring the works of the stage to the screen. It's like they did Shakespeare. How do you do that? I don't know. It's so funny.
But it is like as long as you catch like the one important thing that you're supposed to know, then as long as like the musicality of the words work. Then they won't catch you off.
Title card of to be ellipses, and then just like that's the rest.
No, but like, I mean, there's moments that it did catch me off guard, like when he says in bed with Florence Pugh, the famous not Oppenheimer quote, but the thing that he's most accredited to, which is I am become
death. Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. And so Vishnu said to some prince guy.
Yeah, and it comes up naturally in the movie, but then also unnaturally in the movie when he's like that's what he reads in Sanskrit. Like,
right.
And I'm like, I don't know, that part felt like a little bit like telephone, too much. Like there's certain dialogue parts that did bother me a little bit, but
absolutely. I mean, like all Christopher Nolan movies, right? I mean, almost every one since like Memento, like even at his best, there's always a little something like, But since especially Batman Begins, he has leaned heavily on that thing of like you say something once and then you bring it up again.
Right.
And this movie, and again, it never has been as bad as it was in that movie either. I'll give him that, but like he did it a lot in this one.
Yeah.
And it did feel like he was kind of like the courtroom stuff and those kind of elements of the script felt a little bit like he was kind of pulling the reins in, like kind of like tempering his own instincts to go bigger and bolder, which like I don't think he needed to.
Doesn't Han Solo say something like that to Robert Downey Jr.? Like he repeats a line that he wasn't there for or something like that in this movie?
Oh.
Sorry, Alden Ehrenreich.
Oh my god.
That was too much.
The iconic role of Alden Ehrenreich, Han Solo. The actor we all know played Han Solo.
Sorry. That was too much gymnastics to get to what I was saying. But there is a moment when he says something back to Robert Downey Jr. that I don't think he was even present for, maybe. And it's like, that's a classic Nolan move, too.
Yeah, right. The plot hole.
Didn't you get the memo?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Didn't you get the memo? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, this movie's cast is insanely large. We can't go through them all, nor do I want to, but...
One annoying, and this almost is like as annoying as the repeated lines, but you'll meet a character early on, and you're like... Now, why is that actor playing such a tiny background role with no lines? And then they come in the movie like an hour later to talk for like a minute, and it's like, okay, I guess like it's not
of Rami Malek.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of Rami Malek. I'm thinking of the guy who played the fake honor guard from Dark Knight. You know what I mean? I think you see him early on. The guy who got the file. Oppenheimer's Op.
Yes.
Oppenheimer's Op. I think that was good. Come on, guys. Can you edit that so that you guys laugh?
He's a weird, creepy guy in every single movie.
Yeah. He's the best weird, creepy guy. One of the best
guy from all of the
Denis Villeneuve movies. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think we were both thinking the same thing, Chris. That Michael Caine wasn't in this.
Yes, thank you. God. We were waiting. I'm waiting. I'm okay. He's gonna pop up. Is he gonna be like just passing by?
Wait, am I wrong? What about when the bomb goes off and it goes boom. That wasn't it.
I just wanted like a Dunkirk moment where he just phones in, like his voice is like on the other line, and you're like, bam, there it is. So, but there's no British.
The Mushroom Cloud did
movie.
take on a strange hairdo.
He never plays a non-British accent. Has he ever done a non-British accent in a movie? So this movie didn't have any. It had the opposite. It's all British actor or European actors playing Americans.
He went to British school though,
or Americans playing Europeans. Like
in the case of Benny Safdie, right,
and a couple other dudes. But yeah, he did spend time in England at the beginning, and and what's his name? He used as Niels Bohr,
Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah. So it was, it's not impossible for him to stick somebody in. That's a shame.
There is a lot of
Nolan
cameos, and stuff like that. But
I mean, how good? I don't even want to spoil it, but President Truman. Was that a great performance or not?
Yeah.
He nailed it. He knocked it out of the park.
It was a crazy performance.
And he gave him some crazy lines too. It was amazing.
I mean, you want a fucking tissue?
Yeah.
Like,
carry on, man. I mean,
they don't give a fuck about you. I was like, okay.
That was great.
Yeah, he was great.
He's always great. I mean, but yeah.
I don't know.
It pulled me out of like the way that. I mean, in a good way, like not in a bad way, because I love him. But it was like, it's impossible to not just kind of laugh a little bit when he pops on screen with his Harry Truman makeup on, and it's just like, Gary.
I know. I was there was a split second where it was like, because Benny Safdie, is that which Safdie it was?
Yeah.
And then there's a couple other performances that felt very. I'm in my fake hair. Mm-hmm. I'm in my foreign accent mode. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it felt very actually. I mean, Rami Malek was born wearing like not looking like he's in the right time. But like,
I thought that he did a good job with that speech at the end, but I cannot look at that guy.
I know. So anyway, like I just felt like there were a lot of people like that, and for a split second, I was like, oh, is this going to be another one of these? I thought he. Almost from the beginning, owned that character and like embodied that character so perfectly that it like, I mean, again, it just was a joy to watch. And he like, I think that moment between those two characters is very powerful too, because it's somebody who's like, I have no qualms about what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's
a really interesting choice. You don't see that guy very often in most movies.
Yeah, I was going to say something about Michael Caine in Tenet. The last thing that John David Washington says to him is like, goodbye, Mr. Caine, or whatever he says, like whatever his name is, And it felt like, I didn't mention this on the Tenet episode, but it felt like Nolan saying like, I can't use this old man anymore.
No way.
Or just not saying that he couldn't use, like, I have no use for you, but just saying
but just like
thank you and farewell. Yes.
Being like,
I can't drag you out of bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Out of retirement.
Like that's
what do these.
You're sitting down the entire scene. Right?
I don't mean like I can't use you anymore. I mean literally just
farewell,
like,
Mr. Caine. Thank you for
that
your
kind of
service.
thing. And so when he didn't come into this movie at all, I was like, oh, that really was his goodbye.
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
that's kind of. Oh, that's weak, because like I said, in Dunkirk, you just stick that like a mic in his face when he's in bed and just say some words and put it over the radio. Michael Caine cameo, just all I need. Give me my Michael Caine fix. But I understand.
I was going to ask you guys this, because I was just thinking of random characters that pop up. The Casey Affleck moment, right? Who I thought did a really good job of being like mildly intimidating.
Oh, he was perfect. He was amazing. Just his face.
Yeah.
That was like masterful performance-wise and camera-wise. Yeah. And between the two of them, just delivering those lines and just the subtle like turns of his head. Yeah. And like he's
great.
He doesn't usually play those kind of characters.
No, not at all.
Like he was so threatening.
He's usually the like shy boy.
The one being threatened. The one like the victim.
And they didn't even reveal him immediately either. They're like kind of building him up.
That was a really interesting performance to me, and I thought it was good. And my question is, in the book,
oh boy, God,
they make a really strong argument that Florence Pugh's character, Jean Tatlock, was killed by the FBI.
Oh wow,
and that when they introduce Pash, who's the FBI killer, that I'm like, there's moments in her death scene which is so like Insomnia style, like cut scenes.
There's no blood. Even though it's an R-rated movie, right?
Yeah. And I mean, certainly with her performance. But yeah, there's moments in that when it feels like you can see a gloved hand going over her, and I'm like, are they ever gonna get to like the chance that maybe that's Pash like holding her under? You know?
I didn't,
and then they never go there. So that's what I was curious about.
No, I didn't even think of. I mean, did that
never crossed my mind? But it makes a lot of sense now, and I wonder if somebody who is more observant than me, who even hadn't read the book, could have made that connection, because I don't think that's an impossible connection to make.
I don't think that
there's so much going on in this movie that it's so easy to like again get lost in the details.
Yeah.
But that seems like a pretty clear connection and a pretty compelling one, even just with what's in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a hard thing, is what I understand. I'm not like an expert on suicide or anything, but like to just hold yourself underwater. And
well, she drowned herself.
Right, but she took pills, then like drowned herself, because she went down to the tub. But I think
the movie shows her like struggling to do it too, and that's a weird.
That's what I mean. Is like in that struggling.
How do you do that?
It's
like,
hard to tell what's going on,
right?
But because like I had like this idea in my head that like, are they going to show that it was like? Well, so here's the thing: it's like Oppenheimer went to his grave believing that it was a suicide, so that's why I think he went with that. You know,
okay.
But it's pretty well established that it was most likely a hit.
Jesus.
Does the book make that clear? Is it ambiguous also?
No, and the book makes it clear literally by saying like, this is like, 3 chapters of the book about like how it happened, the drugs that she had. It's a very dry book, and it tells you like every drug that was in her system and how they interact with alcohol and all this stuff and like everything that she was going through. But then it talks about the suicide note and how her dad found it and then like burned a bunch of stuff that was in the like all this stuff.
Weird.
And there's all this stuff, but then they say, whatever happened, Oppenheimer went to his grave believing it was a suicide. So I get that this movie is very much like his perspective, so I would want to go with that. But knowing that and watching those like very quick, millisecond cutscenes.
Yeah, I would say he definitely left space for
like
that
a murder.
Yeah,
it's violent.
Yeah,
like it's a violent suicide.
Yes, and it's like there's certain things you like. I mean, Will aside, like it's hard to imagine being suicidal, but it's like drowning yourself that way. It just seems like impossible almost. Unless you're so drugged.
That's what the book sort of says too. Just like. You can just take pills. You don't have to like, hover over a bathtub until you pass out and then hope that it goes the way. It's like it's all crazy. But I don't know. That was a crazy part, and I think also, like I said, like making him so intimidating, which doesn't really. I guess it works because it's such a great scene. But it doesn't really need to happen for Oppenheimer to have told them things like that lie or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It made me think that there was going to be a scene. Maybe there's a deleted scene somewhere, like, also, But,
yeah, because they needed that conversation to happen because they had it recorded, right? So he had to have that conversation with someone. I mean...
But also just to show that, like, he's in this world that he doesn't understand, and that, like, his aims that he thinks are with, like, America's aims, or that they're working towards this common goal. He's dealing with these people who are just so... Their whole system is violence. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're not going to see this bomb as anything else other than like a death machine, and that's a good thing. You know what I mean? Right. So it really put everything in a different perspective. Like there might be the respectable army guys who are like seem nice, but they're working alongside these guys. And they're all working in the same system, and that you might think it's I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. And I think that my other emotionally favorite moment in the movie came from Matt Damon, my favorite actor. Just kidding. But it was really Cillian Murphy's performance during this moment, but both of them playing off each other after the bomb test, when it suddenly becomes clear that he's like definitely doesn't need him anymore, and there's this like that moment when he's just like, I'll let you know, like as best as my abilities, and like that moment is very much like a Nolan thing, just like you see Cillian Murphy's face be like, no, still gonna be needed. Like I can't go there. I can't be like downshifted like that, you know. And you see Damien in a new light where you're just like, no, he was gonna do this from the fucking first moment that he hired you. You're just another piece in his machine.
Absolutely.
I want to say one more thing, which is like, I read this article about great inventors and their creations, and it was like things like the airplane and like the television and just random things that we kind of take for granted now. And one funny delusion that all these inventors shared was that their invention was going to be like a major puzzle piece in solving world peace.
Right.
Like world peace. The television, like the airplane, like as soon as like it's just really interesting to me, like that on an individual level, as soon as someone says like I can have power, they're like, oh my god, this is gonna, you know, I've done this great thing, I'm a great man, I will take the world in a wonderful new direction. It's hilarious that literally a guy thought that he was doing that with a bomb.
Yeah.
You know, like even like it's a stretch with a TV and it's a stretch with like an airplane, but you're literally making a bomb and you're like, how is this going to create world peace? It's so ridiculous.
Was that when you were out of the... No, you were there for it, when he says Nobel invented dynamite or whatever.
No, I missed that.
That's what you missed.
Yeah.
So you were out of the room for 1 minute, but yeah, he does say that in the movie when Matt Damon says to him, like, you think you're going to get a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that? And he says, oh, well, Nobel invented dynamite. Like, this is, you know? And it's, I don't know, it is really funny, though, but it also was kind of mind-blowing to see it as a bomb. Like, that bomb sequence is so powerful.
Thrilling. And you really, I mean, there's a wonder to it. You know what I mean? Like, they really, and I think Christopher Nolan does this on purpose, like, decontextualizes it from the violence in a way where, like, they're clearly, like, grappling with this, but at the same time, they're all just so in awe of what they've done and the sight of the thing itself, the force of it, like, you know, it's, and feeling, like, connected to that.
But there's another part of me that was watching it that was thinking, like, you have this idea, or I have this idea of a nuclear, like, earth-ending machine, you know, like this nuclear bomb. And then they are treating it like that, you know? And then there's all this science of 2 hours of the movie of just, like, the science behind it. They're, like, building in all the different pieces that are going into place. And then they fucking drop it, and it is this thrilling moment. But you also see it like, oh, it's just a fucking bomb. It's just a bigger explosion than we're used to. You know?
I read, though, that in the actual test, you know, it happened in the early morning and stuff, and they were seeing greens and purples in the cloud from the radioactive elements, and that wasn't really reflected in the movie. It was just flame.
So that was an actual explosion for the movie that they put together. Do you guys? I mean, I don't
know about this, but
I remember when it was being
no CGI. I remember.
Is he going to actually detonate a live? I mean, not a nuclear bomb, obviously, because of the radiation and all of that stuff that we know now. But I wonder, like, to what degree?
You know, in the documentary that I saw, they used real footage of atomic bombs going off, and that kind of swirling flame and smoke, you know, at a scale that is like so incredible. Clearly, I think, inspired the imagery that he was able to conjure. How he did it, I have no clue. I haven't looked into it. But
I also love that it fills the screen slowly. Like, it is like even just from a scene composition thing, I mean, like, it's 3 minutes into that set piece before, like, all of a sudden the whole screen is flame, you know? And I thought that was really fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
We should probably, like, start winding down.
We should. And, yeah, I'm glad that, I mean, this movie gave us so much to think about and talk about. But yeah, just that idea of, like, you know, again, another kind of, like, delusion of, like, you know, telling yourself this story that you're doing the right thing, or that, you know, there'll be a downside, but, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost the way he, like, grapples with all the crazy stuff that he sees and the world that he sees. Like, what is this for? What is my purpose in this? You know what I mean? Like, telling himself this story, and he's given the purpose by the government, and that almost makes it all, like, make sense to him. Yeah. They almost use him just because, like, it makes him vulnerable, being, like, seeing this stuff and having this obsession and having this knowledge. to being exploited. You know what I mean? I guess that's.
I think
I wanted to say.
I was curious.
Oh no, it's not. No, go ahead.
I don't know what I would have thought about this movie if we hadn't just done the Christopher Nolan season of Auteur Detour.
Oh, interesting.
Because I really loved it, and I mean, it's undeniably beautiful and like a feat of, just filming, like craftsmanship, right? Like that part, I think I would have for sure been on board with no matter what. But I really was like drawing on my knowledge of Christopher Nolan watching this movie.
Right.
Like it felt like such a Nolan piece, that was important too. Like and just like even just how we contextualized him like in cinema right now. Like I remember halfway through the movie being like, I'm glad that I was able to contextualize him with like a David Lean and a Stanley Kubrick and like that kind of filmmaker, because I was like, that gives me a way to watch this movie and not get bored too. You know what I mean? Because like I'm not looking for action and I'm not looking for like story. Like I'm looking for like mood and all that kind of thing. So I don't know. Bravo to this movie, but
yeah, and we talk about the way his filmography has unfolded up to this point. He doesn't do two of the same movie back to back ever. Mm-hmm. This is no exception, right? He just went from his last film, Tenet.
Yeah, his next movie is the Frankenstein reboot.
Oh yeah, perfect. This is basically a little bit of that, right? Like man plays God and creates a creature that's beyond his control.
Exactly.
The title of Frankenstein is Modern Prometheus.
Yes, and we know, Ian. We know all about it.
Right. Okay.
But again, he just keeps impressing me with the ways in which his entire filmography linearly unfolds. To your point, I really love that we were able to explore them one at a time in order, and this one fell in like a perfect place.
Yeah. It definitely has me excited for Nolan again. After Tenet was a disappointment to me. Like
I feel like he's gonna get real weird after this one. I don't know why. I want to get some real weird shit going.
Like I said,
it was kind of weird too. There was some.
There was some weirdness, yeah. And like I said, I really feel like, now he's on a new path, or he's like on a new plateau or level or whatever, in a new era. You know what I mean? And I'm very excited for it. And I'm so glad it wasn't like a disappointment. Like I said,
yeah, me too.
Because you guys were disappointed with Tenet, so back-to-back disappointments would probably be like...
Yeah, it really felt like he was kind of like, just do another movie about an old guy, you know what I mean? Like, we need another Oscar-winning biopic. I'm just please no.
Right.
And, good for him for really pushing it.
And good for Cillian Murphy for giving like an incredible performance. And everybody
he was wonderful,
was good,
yeah.
But he really just owned the screen for the whole fucking movie.
Totally.
2 hours.
I'm not a big awards guy, but I can only imagine how many awards I would put this movie up for, and that's not having seen a lot of other ones this year, but like the sound quality was amazing, the acting from Cillian Murphy, the visuals, the editing, the cinematography.
If Barbie and Oppenheimer both get nominated for Best Picture, that'll be so funny. I should say this, this maybe isn't a great closing thought, but again, the way that this story kind of captured so many weird elements, themes of Nolan's all of his films, his whole oeuvre, but all the water visuals, I've been really noticing as we watch them all in a row how much he loves water and this idea of being flooded with water and this kind of I don't know, it's just such a weird theme, visual theme in his films and motif, and it was a huge in this movie, from the first shots, and I was so excited to see it. And there were those visuals of the water overtaking the map. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And
the ripples,
but also
Florence Pugh.
Yeah, I was gonna say Florence Pugh drowning in the bathtub is a big one. But then I was this scene which kind of mirrors the scene in Heat a little bit of the girl, the dead girl in the bathtub, and which is such a big movie for him. And I was but it's that's not a reference to that. It literally happened,
Yeah,
but again, it's just so crazy when it's such.
But you have to think of Christopher Nolan reading that book, and being
oh shit,
no,
absolutely, absolutely.
And especially, I mean, she wasn't his wife, but he loves a dead wife,
Right.
And,
right.
Even that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of a deadbeat wife.
Yeah.
I can say that.
Ooh. No, it's funny with the water because I was immediately reminded of our previous director, Alfonso Cuarón, because his last film, Roma, starts with a really great long take of washing.
That's right.
Yeah. I just keep thinking of that. It hasn't really had much to do with this movie, but I always think of that opening scene because it's so long and it's very soothing to me. I don't know why. It starts off with this beautiful movie with this beautiful image of water and cleanliness and cleansing. Yes. And this movie starts off with this very striking image of these raindrops falling and creating these ripples that we kind of see as a motif that, pops up again and in this movie.
And his beautiful blue eyes looking down.
Oh, man.
Full of reflection.
So many close-ups.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking of, again, a film that, is not from the director's mind, but somehow, one with him. And I was thinking of the movie No Country for Old Men, and how that weirdly is, the ultimate Coen Brothers film, even though it's not one that they just made up. It's one of the only ones that they adapted, and it's just so interesting to me when filmmakers kind of stumble upon something like that just sort of encapsulates all their themes, and they can just lay down the visuals, and it's just such a perfect fit. And this kind of felt like that.
It did, yeah, absolutely. Do we want to try to rate them?
I don't even remember.
I can't remember all the...
Wait, I have my notebooks. I'm the only one who's going to, know what my top 10 was.
Fucking filmography on you.
Oh, my God.
I'll just start it. You got a list here?
Away.
Do you have a list here?
Somewhere. I would always turn back to the beginning. I remember I'd be like, you guys go first.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go. IMDb. Christopher Nolan.
No, I think it's not bookmark.
Can you add... I don't know how to use bookmarks. Can you add the Christopher Nolan, if you ain't first or last, in the posh British accent, please? To the... I would really enjoy that somewhere in the episode. Oh, shit. Okay. There we are.
I'm going to go ahead and start it. Because I
hate this website. I'm sorry.
Falls on my list right now.
Number 1, Doodlebug.
Number 1. The Dark Knight.
What the hell is Doodlebug?
It's a short. It's a short that he made. It's just a goofy little thing.
It's on one of the DVDs.
That was right before Following. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 1, The Dark Knight. Number 2, Dark Knight Rises. Number 3, Batman Begins. Number 4, Memento. Number 5, Interstellar. Number 6, Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Then... What do we got? Prestige.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing? Memento. I'm sorry, not Memento. What's the other one? Insomnia, and then Following, and then Tenet. Right? Is that all of them?
Tenet below Following. You guys really hated that one.
Yeah,
we don't like it, Chris.
I'm often reminded again and again of how little you like that one. Awesome.
Anyway, yeah, Oppenheimer's right below Interstellar for me, I think.
Okay.
We'd rather watch someone follow somebody around than go back in time in the dumbest way possible.
It's a cool movie. I didn't even say Inception. Whatever. It's in there somewhere, too.
Okay.
I happily disagree, but if I may, Inception still number 1. That movie rules. I keep going back to it again and again. I love Memento. That's my number 2. We're going to go with probably The Dark Knight at number 3. I'm thinking, I still really love The Prestige, but I think Interstellar comes in at number 4. Shit, where am I? Good God.
First perfect way to end it.
Number 5.
You sound like you're ordering at a Chinese restaurant. Wait, I think I'm going to go with the...
Number 6. Oppenheimer is going to be a firm number 6 for me. I'm with you, Ian.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's so good, and this is not to slight it because his filmography is amazing. But then it'll probably go Tenet, Dunkirk, Dark Knight Rises, Insomnia, and Following.
I don't think I said Dunkirk either. I totally...
Whatever. Well, I have mine written down, so it'll be easy for me. Dark Knight Trilogy, number 1. Inception, number 2. Memento, number 3. Interstellar, number 4. Oppenheimer, number 5. Prestige, number 6. Following, number 7. Dunkirk and Insomnia, tied for number 8. Doodlebug, number 9. Tenet, number 10.
I gotta go see this Doodlebug movie now.
No, but I think...
I'm curious to see how it ages.
That's what I was gonna say. It's just
I'll say this. Most Christopher Nolan movies are more on the second watch than the first watch, and I really love this. So I think it's gonna be hard to throw on a fucking 3-hour talking
exactly
like this.
Like this is not like a movie that you just like sit down and watch any old time, and the subject matter and the just being about this guy, and it just doesn't. That's not why I go to like watch Christopher Nolan movies. There's always there's usually more of a fantastical element, or
there is part of me that's like feels like, I think I talked about this on the episode, but Dark Knight Rises is a movie that I put on just to put on more than most movies.
Yes, me too. Me too.
And I feel like even though this is a much different movie, I can see myself just being like, it's fucking 11 o'clock. I'm not going to finish it. I'm just going to throw on Oppenheimer.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. It would definitely be one worth, breaking up at least to see again. Because you're right. I think I've appreciated his movies even more the second time I've seen them. I can't think of an exception, really.
I do have one other point to make, which is just we've talked about Christopher Nolan as somebody who believes coming up with ideas is how the world goes forward. You know what I mean? His idea is people come up with these incredible concepts, and that's what moves the world forward. There are literally moments where people say ideas, and then especially it's really interesting because there's these scenes of just guys in suits and some women in these rooms where they're blah blah blah. What if we did this? And it's just it's all just kind of theoretical, and it's all very civilized. And then he cuts in with just kind of an abstract assault of lines and specs and incredible audio rumbling at you, and you kind of feel the violence of the ideas that they're actually saying, and that was really powerful to me. For someone like Oppenheimer, why I think it's a really important story for right now is that there's kind of, and I would have thought Nolan would have been in the wrong camp on this kind of idea, but now I feel better about him politically as a thinker. But there's I think a hope in people that if we come up with a new invention, or we come up with a new idea, you know what I mean? If we could turn CO2 gas into something else, then that would solve global warming. If we could change car engines so that they burn on corn, then that would solve global warming.
It's plastic straws.
And I bet you and I guarantee anything we create to solve the problem is going to become part of the system that is the system that is destroying everything, and you can't fix it with a great invention.
That is a good place to end it, because I do agree. As much as I said I don't love that Christopher Nolan leaves this movie with this was the most important man that we tore down, because we can't have that for long. You live long enough to see yourself become a villain. But I do love that he does fully make the statement that there's always going to be a fucking bigger bomb. It's just going to keep going this way.
Yeah.
He knows, and Oppenheimer knows.
We get bulletproof vests, they get armor-piercing bullets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's good at that.
Yeah. As long as you're working in this system, you can never beat the system that way. It's going to take the tearing down of that system.
Yeah. And I think we didn't really get into the
as Barbie said.
We didn't. Really,
I think Barbie.
We didn't really get into the communism of it, of the story, but
I think it's an important element.
It is an important element,
and how that movement was destroyed and torn apart by pettiness, internally, and more forcefully by the U.S. government. Again, they couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't want those people around, and they got rid of them. And now we don't have a communist party in America.
Right.
And now we're all going to die in 30 years of global warming. So,
that positive.
Well, at least we won't get atomic bombs.
So long from friends. You never.
The end. No, this has been a lot of fun, and thanks for sticking with us for all these weeks, and I hope we gave you a nice suspenseful wait for this final episode.
Yeah, okay. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour.